so now we are actually live. So if you want to wave, now is your time. Congratulations. So explain why we need this API.
So the original pipe, there's two sides, a reader and a writer. On the right side, if you called complete, we would flush. We would move the buffer data to the reader side synchronously, because it was just a single buffer copy or whatever. And it wouldn't be an issue. You would never cut data off. So if I called like get memory blah advanced complete, even though I didn't call flush async, it would make the data available to the reader in complete. So when the reader called read next, it would get whatever got written in that get memory advanced.
Right.
Works fine. We now have a thing called a StreamPipeReader, which wraps a stream. And there's no way to make this work without having this thing write synchronously. Today what happens is I call get memory advanced. There's a buffer in the pipe itself, PipeWriter. I call complete. If I don't want to cut the data off and have it end up being written to the stream, it has to get the buffer and call write and flush in complete. So complete async is basically the same as like dispose async for a stream writer. If you buffer data and
so basically you're wrapping asynchronous APIs, so you need to be asynchronous.
Exactly.
Yeah, like Stream itself has dispose async now, right?
Right.
So that'd be another reason.
Exactly. So, yeah. And the second reason is complete also calls dispose in some cases. If you call PipeWriter.create passing a stream in, and you pass leave open as false, it calls dispose incomplete. So complete async would call dispose async in the new universe.
And so we make the existing complete sync methods, they'll wrap the sync methods on stream, and these complete async ones will wrap the async ones on stream.
Right. So in my PR for this change, the StreamPipeWriter incomplete will call synchronous write and flush, and for complete async calls async write and flush.
Okay.
Got it. And if it's been configured to dispose the underlying stream, then it'll be dispose or dispose async, presumably.
Right.
Got it.
Steve, can you remind us of the rules regarding value task versus task?
Complete. The rules.
It's basically
the
it's basically if you it's about consumption is the primary thing. So if you expect your consumer to 99.99% of the time just to wait, then using value task is fine.
Okay.
If you're where it's particularly valuable in sort of the 99% case is when you've got a value task of T, because then you can avoid allocating for each T. And then in sort of the remaining 5% case or whatever, it can also be useful for value task if you believe that now or at some point in the future you'd be able to use a pooled object. There's a small bit of overhead associated with using value task versus task for if you don't employ any of the optimizations, so you want to be sure that it's a net benefit, and there's a usability impact to trying to use a value task for anything other than awaiting. So you want to make sure that pretty much everyone who's going to consume your API is simply going to await your call.
The FDG3 draft is only use value task if you have a custom value task completion source or whatever it's called, or you are transparently returning another value task.
It's tricky because if you're virtual,
it also says virtual is hard and don't do it.
No, it's not. If you're virtual, then you have to allow.
There's no T either, so
you have to allow
Yeah.
implementations to write and do their own thing, right? So that's
why I've
tricky.
That's why I've sort of focused over time on the consumption side of things, because you kind of have to imagine that in the fullness of time, if performance really mattered, you would exert the energy to make it as performant as possible.
Yeah.
And so it really comes down to how do you expect your API to be consumed? And there are many more things that you can do with task than you can directly with value task.
Yep.
And so it's really about consumption. And if you expect it to be directly awaited basically all the time, and you believe that now or in the future you will be able to take advantage of the perf benefits of value task, which could include overriders, then it's perfectly reasonable to use it.
So in this case, though, we rep stream, right?
No.
Well, that's one
It's
of the
virtual.
things you could do.
Sure, but like, I mean, we add the API specifically for repping the stream. So that means in this case.
No. That's just one specific derived.
Okay, let me finish my thought. So basically, like one of the usages is stream, right?
Yes.
So the question now is, when stream doesn't have value task APIs,
It
what
does.
does that mean?
It does.
That's for the memory overload.
It does for write and for dispose async. It's value task.
Yeah, write, flush, and
I see.
dispose all have async.
And those are the only ones we call from this?
Yeah.
So is the pattern going to be just call complete async like I want
Yes. In our code.
for like everywhere though? Because
Yes.
like no matter you don't know what type it is, right? So if you call complete, it could be sync, and if you're using a string wrapper, and most people probably don't want that.
Well, when you use complete, so if you use, so for the most part, if you call flush, complete will no up anyway.
Yeah.
If you have this pattern where you call your memory advanced and you don't call flush, like how we do in our.
Like
Though you'll also be calling like the inner dispose async, right? So depending on the stream implementation,
the question
that'll be
is like
Yeah.
if you have the default PipeWriter or default PipeReader, like is there going to be a preference for calling complete there versus calling complete async?
In the default case, complete async will just call complete like this.
Yeah.
but you would prefer complete async for max forward.
I see.
compatibility.
Yeah.
I see.
We recommend people call complete async in general.
I see.
Yeah. But for the most part, it shouldn't affect.
Why not just get rid of complete?
Breaking.
Break and change.
Just break and change
Yeah.
aspect?
And it's not worth it.
Also, the next version of Framework Design Guidelines says if you have an async, have a non-async version of the same method.
I see.
Really?
For your synchronous callers.
But in both of them should be
No.
virtual to
That's a
avoid the
terrible
sync over
guideline.
async. Is that
Can
the
I
idea?
refute that guideline? That's terrible. What?
David, aren't you the one who asked for that guideline?
What?
Sync over async is what it's
No,
trying
let's
to
do
avoid.
sync over everything. It's
All
fine.
right, so let's make sync pipes then.
Huh?
We need to make sync pipes then because
No.
there's no sync APIs.
Never.
Well,
we will
Okay,
violate
so
guidelines.
like
grandfathered in.
Sync
No,
pipes.
there's try read.
That's
There you
not
go. Sync
The non-blocking
The
read
non-blocking
API.
read API.
Yeah.
the polling API.
Okay, so does anybody have a problem with this particular API then?
I think it's
Seems
perfect.
like nobody has a problem with the shape as proposed. Is that fair?
Yes, that's fair.
Completely fair.
If Steve's okay with value task, I'm okay with value task, but it does go against the guidance that we approved when we were reviewing the bullets for tasks previously.
I feel like it's like right async returning.
Sorry,
value
why-
task
why
on
do you say
stream,
that?
Right?
Our
Like it's,
task
there's no
guidance
but
when
it
we
could be
reviewed
optional.
when we reviewed the
I don't
bullets.
think it's against the guidance. It's virtual, which means
Yeah.
we have no idea
Fair.
what implementation is going to be able to do, and we actually expect that implementations will be able to do I would expect the default implementation.
If it
of
has to
this
flush, right?
do-
Like it would probably use
Just
the
when-
custom.
When we
high-value
reviewed the
task
bullets
source.
previously,
Yes.
it was prefer task over value task unless you're writing a high-value completion source. If we want to say virtual means someone could be wanting to do that, and therefore value task
So,
is okay.
so look, we should amend those guidelines. It's the I value task source thing is really if you believe that you will be able to do a high performance implementation now or in the future, and when it's virtual, like we really do need to call out the virtual case because you're providing a place for arbitrary implementations to plug in, and so the question becomes, can any of them do the high performance thing, and is it important to allow any of them to do the high performance thing? And in this case, it seems like it is.
Yep.
I just finished writing that.
I'll tweak it for you.
Unless the book is in the shelf, it's not done, right?
It better be a gist instead of a book.
Second edition.
Don't burn those trees down.
If we don't burn trees, I don't get paid.
Capitalism ruins everything. All right, so then my next question is, so we have this other issue here, which seems somewhat related. So let me just copy and paste this
Oh
guy.
no! Oops. This one?
I don't know. Like, you tell me.
Yeah, this one.
I don't know how we deal with these mistakes. We can deprecate the API. So you made a comment that said it's abstract, right?
Yeah. So the
We
question
make it
is,
virtual?
yeah. I mean, yes.
Is that a thing?
Yes, we have done this in the past.
Make it virtual, Noah.
I think we should do that bare minimum. Make it virtual and make it not.
So what is
We would
so?
consider that breaking, like if most implementations no op.
Yeah, that's why I want to remove it.
Well,
I
why
kinda
is it
wanna
a
get rid of
breaking change?
Because people would expect that if it's there, that their callback would get called if they registered.
It used to throw. No, it just no ops.
Well, I mean, that's more like the
We can make it virtual throw.
That's why you
Yeah,
need-
virtual throw is probably what you'd have to do.
It can't throw. Sorry, nope.
Well,
You
that
need-
would be a breaking.
You have to add a can API if you're gonna.
Well, they
if you're
both
gonna
are.
throw.
One's just being honest about it.
If it's abstract currently, everyone has an implementation currently.
Yeah.
If we make it virtual throw, then that just means new implementations would
Yeah.
be throwing until they did something.
Yeah, but it can't throw. It has to go up. It can't throw. It used to throw at first. It's too unusable. If
He's
you
saying
throw-
that like StreamPipeReader and Reader could no op, though I still don't
they
love
do
it.
it. They do no up.
I know they do,
Yeah.
but I still don't love it. But the base,
So who
virtual
calls
implementation would
this
have to
right
throw.
now?
So
It's infrastructure.
Who could
right?
call it? We got rid of it in ASP.NET Core.
No, but who is normally the one calling it?
What do you mean? Who?
The consumer. So
So it's not the infrastructure, right? It's literally
No.
the
Yeah, it's the caller, yeah.
the consumer.
The intent was to have a way, if you were not the person doing the reading or writing, to get notified when either side was finished. Does
But-
it really work if you wrap a stream though?
That sounds to me literally like this is an example where we make it virtual, we know of it, we obsolete it,
Yes.
until people don't use
Yes.
it.
Yes.
I mean, everything else seems worse. Like
Yep.
making it throw seems backwards because
Yep.
it now means everybody has to override it to just make it do
To
nothing,
go up. Yep.
which seems
okay,
worse.
but is making it do nothing better than throwing? Like I would argue
Yes.
that if someone is calling it,
It
they
should.
expect their callback to be called. When
yeah, but they shouldn't, right? So that's
they
what you're-
shouldn't. Why not? I mean, that's what it's always
because we're gonna
documented.
make
That's
it-
done.
That's what he
Because
said.
we're gonna make it obsolete. That's why.
Yeah.
Oh, so if they shouldn't be calling it, it should throw, and then they fix it the same way by not calling it.
Well, you would make it obsolete because it's two different sides.
But what I'm saying is, anyone who calls it today needs that functionality to work.
No, they don't.
Yeah, they do.
Except
Why
if
do
they still
call
have
it,
that,
right?
if they have that, if they have that call and they've deployed their app and they're not broken as a result, why would we forcefully break them?
Yeah.
But we wouldn't, right? Like this goes back to Jeremy's point. It's like it's more of
No, I understand, but adding an exception would.
But they both break them. In one case, your callback doesn't get called. The other case, you
But if
throw
they're
when you
properly
register.
running and their callback isn't getting called, then they have no problem.
Yeah, like, because who would be invoking this? Because if the implementation simply chose to never invoke the thing, even though you registered it, like
Exactly.
that's the implementation's choice.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
So while it would be unexpected and it may make sense to mark it as obsolete as well, being no op.
The problem is this is kind of like clean up shutdown logic. So the fact that it doesn't get called is concerning to me.
I do have one more. This that's pretty here already. There's the other side. Maybe we should obsolete both sides.
Yes, if you're gonna do one
Yeah,
side.
do both sides.
Like I thought that was the issue.
It has one side. The issue is the other side can be implemented.
Yeah.
This
but-
side is pretty impossible to implement.
Yeah, I think we should be more explicit with the breakage.
I like
than
it.
Implicit. Like I think you're gonna get more subtle, harder to diagnose issues
I can live
with
with it.
no opping.
I can live with it because the stream implementation has the same behavior today.
I know.
So
Is there how many use cases?
The good news is that those consumers of PipeWriter are new.
Yes.
The good news in general is that Pipe isn't a super widely used API. But
nice. You can. Oh, can you go back to the previous one email?
like I hate using that as an
Sorry.
excuse
No,
for
it's just-
making certain kinds of breaks.
So for this one, we want to make it both sides. So deprecate PipeReader.OnReaderCompleted and PipeReader.OnReaderCompleted.
Yeah, that's what I found.
Yeah.
Okay, oopsie.
So put in the note. I'll just.
Or where you're writing this.
They're useful. Yeah, don't get me wrong.
Well, in the past, people have used this as like the one way to like abort a connection. And now if it if it breaks, yeah. But I'm just saying, right?
Even
like the one
even
consumer that we know
sockets-
exists.
Even the no, that still works, right?
I mean, it works now because we fixed it.
The Stream API, like the new Stream wrappers don't fire the callbacks.
I know.
The old PipeWriter still works, so you won't be broken yet for it. You get notified that that is obsolete and you shouldn't use it anymore. That's all.
So,
If you upgrade pipes, it'll still work.
so did we just say we should throw, or did we say we should?
No,
throw?
we're not throwing.
Okay.
We're gonna just deprecate, make it virtual, obsolete both sides,
Yes.
and delete the API in 7.0.
Why 7?
I don't know.
I mean, 5 seems
Bigger
fine.
than 3.
And given that you guys have a much lower bar for breaking changes.
Whoa, hey, what?
I mean,
let's
you
not,
just
let's
proved
not.
it. Like, holy moly.
By the way, your spreadsheet is amazing.
Yeah.
Still honestly reading that thing.
All right, so then we have done this one. We've done this one. Oopsie, clicked the wrong button here.
You want complaints about it?
All right, so this is Tanner's issue where there was a lot of discussion whether it's nullable versus non-nullable.
And Stephen also raised that rather than just buffer size, we should be touching all of the integer-based ones there, since they also impact things like default size.
Sorry, which one?
And it seems like if we talked about previously, we talked about only touching the buffer size parameters, but there are all these other in the PipeOptions APIs. There are these other integer-based parameters, and it seems strange that we would use -1 to mean the default for some, but not all.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, just go with all of them.
We can null.
Yeah, I have no. Wait a minute. Do we have a final API proposal somewhere here, or is it just?
So we just made the constructors take nullable.
Yeah, it's basically those APIs
The
there.
constructors, these are in options, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they're read only.
I see.
You knew it up and you have to pass all your.
Oh, the constructors for the options.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we just made every argument in nullable, right?
No.
With the names.
That was -1.
No. Nullable makes more sense. -1 are
Well, that isn't that a breaking change?
breaking change.
I mean, you could have
I
an
guess it
overload on the
is, kind of.
constructor, right? Like,
No, what?
Sorry, is what a breaking
Well,
change
wait,
changing the
have we
default?
shipped? We've shipped all of these before,
Yeah,
or
that's
just pipe
not
options?
the stream one. We've shipped the pipe options before.
Oh.
But we changed the values in 3.0. So is that a breaking change?
It is a breaking change, but we said it's unacceptable.
Okay, so we.
But
should
changing a
it.
data type is different.
Yes.
yeah, exactly.
That's why I'm asking, like, what is the change? Like, is the change in the default value, or the name, or the structure?
So,
Be the property
the
for one, right?
proposal is to make these no longer a hard-coded number. That way we can freely change it and impact existing apps based on future profiling data we get, because we're
Yes.
currently basing it off of roughly Skylake computers we're running in the office, not
Right.
necessarily what people are using in the real world.
Not even that. Just like.
Yeah, and so my original proposal was use -1 because we're using that in like the Stream APIs. I think it makes sense. It's consistent. There's no perceived overhead in any case because it's just an integral value,
Right.
and it would make it consistent with everywhere where we can't use nullable because it would be a breaking change. But Stephen
I
raised
see.
the issue
I
that
see.
maybe we should just use nullable on APIs which we haven't shipped before. So
Well,
And some of
actually,
these
I just
nulls
care
are
about
limited,
consistency.
not,
I think
like,
David was
optimized.
suggesting null.
okay, Stephen
Hold on.
says he just cares about consistency.
So does that mean you're retracting your nullable proposal? You would rather have them all either -1 or all nullable, but given that we can't make them all nullable, you rather prefer -1 then?
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
So this is interesting,
So that-
right?
that's
So
a-
there's the default value, there's the unlimited value,
Yeah.
and then there's whatever you set it to. So I understand that changing a default value is breaking, which is interesting.
Well, it's
No. The type is breaking.
Okay, because like so right now for things like pause and resume tighter writer threshold, we just have integer values,
I
right, as default. Null would mean unlimited. Like that wouldn't mean default today.
You can't set null though.
You mean zero?
Negative
Zero.
1,
Zero.
or 0 or
Zero,
whatever.
yeah.
Zero's
What-
limited.
but I'm talking. Okay, I'm switching context. I'm
Yeah.
kind of talking the future where it was nullable.
Yep.
But yeah, the sentinel value, whatever it is unlimited. Do we want another sentinel value for like a changeable default value, or can we just change the default like
No.
in newer releases?
well,
It has to be.
I mean, you could change the constant, but anyone who had their binary already compiled is going to still have the old value.
yeah, that's the point. Is if we set it to a hard-coded value and we determine like 3 years from now, 2048 was a bad buffer size. We really should have been doing 512 based on metrics we're getting from users. Then everyone has to recompile their existing app if it's that hard-coded value. If it's -1, we can change it under the covers, and anyone who's deciding to roll forward to the new version just picks it up.
I think I got it.
And then theoretically, 0 is a bad value because 0 could mean things ranging from unlimited to no buffering to anything else. So
not min value.
-1 is going to always be an invalid value for a size. and it's the cheapest negative value to construct because it's literally just XOR a value to get 0 and then not it to get all ones.
Well, it's also
Yeah, but
not
perf in
really-
these situations doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, it's kind of.
In like long min value list looks really funky here too. It's like what? -1 people are like, oh, I think I know what that is.
So when you read the properties, you get the actual value though, right?
Yes, that's why they should not. So the struct should not expose the default. Sorry, the sentinel value. It should basically the constructor should say if it's -1, set it to whatever you want it to be. So then, otherwise, if you want to tweak anything, you need to be able to get the value out of the system somehow, right?
So concretely, for PipeOptions.PauseWriter threshold, right? Today, 0 is unlimited, right? And then everything else is a value.
Yep.
So we're saying that we make -1 the default. 0 stays unlimited.
Yep.
-1 is you haven't specified a you haven't specified a parameter to the constructor. The constructor will then replace it with the value that is currently the literal in the default value.
Yeah.
So the property will say what it is right now. If take the code that you would write right now, specifying as few arguments as possible, read the property value. We make this change to -1, your code does not change.
Yes.
You still see the same number until the future when we decide that that was a bad default.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the default parameters don't create overloads. They inject that value as a literal in the caller code.
Okay, that's reasonable. So -1 for all these things. Oh, I guess the only weird thing was that if you pass -1 to as buffer size, it'll just change the default instead of throwing. That was the only weirdness with -1, but
I mean,
That should be fine.
it just says, I'm explicitly asserting that I don't have an opinion.
it's more like if you didn't say anything. So null is better because null kind of represents I didn't give a value versus like passing a -1 is like, oh shit, I passed the wrong value and so throw, right?
But
it's
accepting
not-
the -1 lets somebody have another helper that took it as another maybe optional parameter and is forwarding it you don't want them to have to figure out, was I given this value and do I need to rebind the call to have,
I mean, nullable is better in the sense that you don't have to remove values from your value space.
Exactly,
Right?
just no.
But I mean, for almost all of our cases, most of the time, ints can only be positive, so you have a fairly large, sentinel value space. If
You're trading off throwing for this sentinel value, so that's all.
Yeah, I mean, you could. I mean, there are cases. I mean, with the same discussion in range, right? Can you, like when we said, how do you indicate indexing from the end? Right? And the concern was, well, when your indexing computation has a bug and you accidentally get negative
values, yeah. Exactly.
Now you have a valid index when in fact you really wanted the thing to throw. But -1 is also very. I mean, the problem with indexing from end was it's basically an unbounded sentinel space, whereas this one is you would have to hit exactly -1, which. Yeah, it can happen, but at the same time, even if you happen to hit this case, probably nothing bad will happen, right?
The thing that makes me lean against nullable is that pipes needs effectively 2 sentinel values, one for default and one for unlimited, like for this, threshold size.
Yeah,
so unless you want like nullable of nullable event, like you might as well just use. I mean, you could, but like you might as well just use.
Question mark. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
This is good. Is that time without infinite time span, like -1 or something like that? Time span not infinite.
Yeah, because
Timeout's not infinite.
Yeah,
because
Yeah, not time span. Though timeout.infinite is a time span.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
-1's also commonly used in native code, so people will be familiar with it if they come
Code is
from.
awful. You can't be
You can't have C# without native code.
Says who? Or actually, no, that's true. No native.
All right. That answers that. All right. So then the next one would be This one from Jeremy. Is Jeremy on the call? Yeah, he is.
Yes.
I'm here. Or will be there.
So yeah, what do you want to do in this one?
In the JSON converter factory, the create converter is currently protected, and internally, the base class, we have an internal accessor to go and get at it, so that we can actually create them. When you're composing, if you want to compose other factories, the only way to do it now is through derivation. And, in particular, we have the JSON string enum converter, which I sealed as part of the original plan, because, generally speaking, I'd rather have them sealed for performance and, flexibility and changing implementation details. But that makes it impossible to use to build on the JSON enum converter, JSON string enum converter. Because you can't derive from it, and then you can't also compose it either, because the create converter piece. So the scenario they have here is that, and apparently this is reasonably common, is that people, or common enough that somebody already opened an issue on it, is that they want to put it out as a string, but not if it's flags. So they write their own converter that checks to see if it's flags, and if it doesn't have flags, it uses the string enum converter. Otherwise, it just falls back to the default, which it puts it out as a number, right?
So this came up in API review a while back,
Yeah.
because I think I was the one who actually called this out, that this should be public. But one of the things that we had also brought up at the same time is, if I'm trying to create a JSON converter that can handle list of t, and I don't know what the t is until create converter is called, how do I actually get the converter for that t, unless I also have access to the context object that the current JSON.
So there's a two-stage call here. So I didn't put the rest of the APIs in here, but the first thing is can convert gets called. So that's public, but you just handle can convert, and create converter only gets called if can convert returns true.
It only gets called by the serializer infrastructure.
Yeah.
Once it's public, anybody can call it.
Right.
Yeah.
No,
yeah.
so
the
that still doesn't answer my question though. So say that I'm creating a converter for list of t, and
sure,
my can you create a converter for list of person is called. I actually can't answer that unless I can go back into the serializer and say, hey, is there a converter for person?
I see. I'm trying.
True.
Yeah.
Oh, if there's you can't answer if there is an existing converter for that type.
Right. So my list of t converter can work if and only if there is an existing converter for t implemented by someone else, or if t can use the default converter.
Yeah. One of the things that you can do is, it does go in order. So.
Well,
you want to handle it only if somebody else doesn't?
No, I am the list of t converter. I am the converter for all possible list of t. It's just because it's all possible list of t, I need to wrap the converter for t. How do I get it?
well, I think the idea is you would start with the JSON serializer options, where you can you can say get converter, then you say person, and if the answer comes back, well, now you have a JSON converter, and you can call for the person.
It's not being passed in here. I don't have access to the JSON serializer options.
No, that is true, but I think Jeremy's scenario, when you're composing, converters / factories, that code that does that has to have a handle on the JSON serializer options that provide the context.
Yeah, but where do I get it from? How? I want to see a code sample.
Yeah,
that actually
is that if you have an example of how you use it, the factory?
Because that was also one of the things we called out in API review last time. I want to see a code sample for it, and that was never provided.
Well, the code sample that people normally do is they just derive, right?
The code sample that was provided was I am a list of t where t is very specifically int or long. I wanted to see a code sample for any arbitrary t.
Yeah.
I see you hardcode the actual.
No, I think you're right. You have
You
to
have the
pass in the
context.
settings, otherwise you're screwed.
So today they have to derive from the base converter and then override.
So, the way you do it now, the way you do it if we don't make the converter unsealed is presuming we make this thing public, is that you make a new factory.
Yeah.
You make an instance of the JSON string enum converter in it.
Right.
And for can handle, you check to see if it's the type of enum, and then if it actually doesn't have the flags attribute, and that's your true. And then when you get the converter, then you get the converter from the string enum converter.
But you have to invoke that type by name, the string enum converter. You can't ask, was it already overridden using another attribute on either the property or the override on the serialization options altogether.
So you register your new converter. The string enum converter is never registered.
Unless someone registers it.
Yeah.
Right. You can't.
And there's an ordering thing. That's orthogonal to this, I think.
I think Levi's argument is you're saying you want to add this for composition, but the first composition scenario he thought of, the API doesn't satisfy.
Yeah, I'm not claiming that this thing
that
this
we
thing
need to pass
solves
the
all
JSON
composition.
serializer options in as another parameter into these methods.
I think that one makes sense. I think the other one, I would agree with Jeremy. Okay, that's confusing. The other Jeremy on the phone.
The first Jeremy.
Yeah, the first Jeremy.
I was here first.
No, I think there's two scenarios, right? There's one, I want to compose multiple converters, right? So as you said, like I have a generic, as you said, like the list of T1, right? In this case, you want to override can convert, in which case you want to ask back, did somebody register a converter for person, right? Yeah. So in that case, I think the only sensible scenario the only sensible API for this would be we just pass in a parameter. I think anything else would be crazy, right? The other one was what the other Jeremy just brought up is like if somebody misconfigures this. I think that's fair to say don't care, because the idea is if somebody wants to customize how, let's say, enums are serialized, the idea would be instead of them registering the string enum converter, they would register the non-flag string enum converter, and then they can decide what their scope is. It might be global, it might be for specific types, but that's the the configuration, I guess, of serialization context, which this guy doesn't have to know.
I guess this one does look more like overriding, but the list of key compositions that can convert and create thingy should both take the serializer option so that they can answer the question based on asking, well, what would you have done with that type?
Yes.
Or what would you have done with the first generic parameter of that type?
I mean, the question is if we just pass in the settings, that may not be enough, right? Because as you said, like let's say you own a property that returns a list of person.
But I think the settings is the thing that you can ask. You can go find the JSON property info for each thing, which includes the overrides. Whatever thing includes the overrides tree.
I don't think you, I guess
converters. That may be a sub-field on the options, but I thought it was just the options itself was the whole cache of all of the results.
No, I think that might not be public. So the settings only has the global settings.
It's stored in there, but it's not public.
I don't know if making this method public is actually necessary for this very particular scenario.
Get converter on the options?
Yeah, so that's a bad API, but like
well, you can register multiple converters. That is a possibility.
It's on here. So the options have get converter.
So you can get other convertors without you having the options referenced to it.
Well, because they're gone through in order. You could just like do things in the right order for this particular scenario. So you could register your own, but no.
You can't compose
properly. Yeah, you register. You just have to make one that like looks for the ones with the flags and returns the int value. Yeah, that like, and then register the string enum converter after that. So that is a possibility for this particular scenario.
The only thing is when you pass in the options, the only thing you can ask for are converters for types. You can't ask for, on this property that somebody specify a converter.
Oh, I see. You don't have any context.
Yes.
As to where it's being applied.
Which we may not care, right? But like that I guess it also depends on what that would mean, because the idea is fundamentally that doesn't compose, right?
Yeah, maybe that's fine. If you can specify a converter on a specific property, can you?
Yes, yes.
Then that's what you do.
But that has to be for the whole type, right? That can't just be for person, right? That would have to be for the whole list of person, right?
Yes.
In which case, well, there's no composition because you just specify the exact converter that's being used. Maybe that's fine.
Do the options get passed in JSON.NET Converter? You get the options and you get other converters and compose that way?
Can tell you in a sec.
You can. It seems kind of like.
I'm going by based on how the MVC model mining
I
system
think you
works.
want to call other converts to composition. The model mining. Get binder for
You
block.
get the reader, you get the type, and the JSON serializer. I guess the serializer you can probably
Serializer.
Yeah, that has.
The instance in our JSON serializer options is roughly equivalent to James's JSON serializer, in that it's the thing that holds all the state of what you're doing.
Converters are
Yeah.
converters, which is probably a dictionary or something, right? Yeah, it's a converter collection, which presumably you can probably. Oh, it's just a collection, so I don't know how he maps it to types.
Do you have to like leap over that thing?
So does the converter know its type then? It seems odd, but maybe.
So,
Yes,
I mean,
you basically have to you have to basically loop over them, and then
pass one.
you just say, can you convert this type? Yeah.
From the specific point of should this protected, or can we make this protected thing public? The fact that the can convert is public means that the actual do the work should be public. But I think that at least it feels like the people in this room have enough feeling that the current signatures are wrong and should be fixed.
Yeah.
And we have about 3 days to do it.
That's an issue, right? We should add the options to the converter class.
I can create another issue for that.
Well, it should
Oh,
have
we
been in
can
the
rewrite
notes.
anything in the.
Yeah.
It should have been in the notes from the last API review. Were they posted somewhere?
Yeah, whatever other issue.
So there was a request to do that?
Yes.
Well, in the last review, somebody, it might have been Levi or whatever, brought up whether create converter should be public, and I think Stephen Harder pushed back and said, "This is only called by infrastructure. There's no reason why it has to be public." And then we convinced ourselves that we never want to make it public, and that's why we went with protected. But I don't think there were notes particular for this item. I think it was just in the discussion.
Was that API review recorded? Because we should
Yeah.
go back and take a look.
Yeah,
at that.
I mean, I posted the notes.
So,
probably out of
all right,
whatever issue.
I just wasn't aware of that. I mean, I only hit this because I had done the string enum converter.
Yeah.
You know, and then somebody was trying to like compose with it and couldn't.
Yeah.
So I can. So the API we're asking for then is that like is that the both can convert and create converter, or like also have the options passed?
Yeah, both need it. Because you need not just to be able to answer the question, you need to be able to do it.
And so it looks like with James's design, just to compare it, can convert, you only get the type and you're supposed to answer the question, and then write, which is the final answer, is given the serializer, which has all the options on it. But so I mean, theoretically, we could do a similar thing that like you create the factory that remembers what the type is, and I don't know where we go after this. I don't know what the write looks like. Maybe we get the options there, at which point you've deferred the answer until really late, and then you go, oh wait, nope, I actually don't know how to write this down. But turns out you wouldn't have either, so it's not a problem. So,
Would it be a bad thing to be adding this in the next version as a like second?
It would just
Optional.
be an overload.
well, because now we have two competing.
Well, but then
virtuals, and how do you-
there are a lot of people, I presume, that don't care about. I mean, the majority. I mean, certainly every case right now, we don't care.
Yeah, it's just it becomes impossible for the caller to do that. Right?
to know which override to override.
Well, if one stays public and one stays nothing,
But
it's
do
only
we,
one you
do
can
we,
call.
Not if you're deriving the type.
do we build all of our internal converts on top of public API, or do we use a different API internally?
No, we use the same thing.
but many of these methods that are protected
Just
are actually
all
protected
the everything is built on the public converter stuff. It's just all our converters are internal,
Really?
except for
Sure?
string. Yeah. Huh?
Okay. I have to go look.
I sure. Yeah. Positive.
You ask a
Okay.
different question. You
Yeah.
think that's right.
That's not what I want to hear. That's wrong. That's the wrong answer. That's good, but
The right answer.
So all right. So I can take both things back then, and like I can add the other parameter to all those.
All right, so I just marked the API as needs work, and I just posted the comment underneath it. Let's go back. Oh, it actually opened this.
Reddit needs work.
Is it needs work, or is it like just we want?
Well,
we
the
wanna
problem is if you make the
no,
API
we
public for composition reasons, then I think the design just making the API public as is broken.
Huh?
So if you just make the change you proposed here, I think the feeling of the room is that that's a broken design because you can't actually compose them.
Well, it's I don't know. It's not that it's broken. It's just that there's other functionality you want in addition.
Yeah,
Is
it just doesn't fulfill the scenario I asked for. Yeah, that doesn't make it broken. Certainly.
Sure. Like to me, this is kind of like you're pointing a spotlight on something that will be hard to extend later, which to me is kind of the same as broken. Like
Sure,
you basically expose an extension point
API.
that you can convince us is sufficient, which I think is a problem. And like adding it later, like if you add an overload later, it's going to be hard because now
Well, we have to.
caller
Like,
cannot
if
actually
we want to
rely
do
on
that,
this
we
thing.
want to do it for the other one that is public.
So what?
For can convert, we want it on there as well, and that's broken if we don't do that right now.
Right.
So I thought that. So aren't we agreed on that? That's what we want. Is we just want the can convert and
Okay. So
create converter.
yeah. So right now, because I finally found a thing that did reading and writing. Reading and writing does take the JSON serializer option. So right now we have a design that looks like Microsoft JSON, where the can and then the factory are supposed to just create something that can't answer the final question until the read or write method is actually called. But in Levi's list of T example, it does feel like if there was no custom converter registered, or whether or not there's a custom converter registered, like it's either you're going to hit a default behavior and know how to do it, or there's nothing registered and the type's unserializable. So it's possible that maybe we don't need the options during these two questions.
So defer to read and write.
Because read and write do get the options. So at the time of conversion, you can ask, was there another converter that was supposed to handle a generic type parameter? You just can't ask it at the time that you're asked, do you know how to write list of T?
And then the instance would cache that because clearly we don't want to look that up every single time.
Yeah.
Sure.
So the factory would return a thing that knows that it's writing a list potato, and then at runtime it figures out how am I actually supposed to write down a potato.
I see what you're saying.
Serializer options.
So get converter.
Yeah.
For potato.
Yeah.
So I can do list of potato, and if I blow up at runtime, then so.
Yeah.
I guess that's fair.
So the API might solve the scenarios. It's a little. It's not the way that we thought of it, and with the limited sample that was on the screen, it was hard to answer. It also took me a very long time to find any API that had read or write on it.
So what do we have then as a takeaway here then? Because I want to make sure that we get done what we need to get done.
So before the week is out, but before things get really, really, really hard to make more changes, it would be
precisely.
good to see that someone could write a converter for a list of T where the T itself was using a late bound converter. So the kind that doesn't use the attribute model and just uses the settings injection. And if that can be written, then the API is good. And if it's not, then we may need to change the can convert and create factory method.
Well, like as you pointed out, I think it can be written,
right,
but it will have constraints and it's awkward.
Yeah, and if we don't like it and wish that we had it in the convert methods, then we should change them now, because we don't want in the future to have two virtuals that you have to, like, look at stream and overriding stream. It has several competing virtuals for the same functionality, and it's very hard for anyone to understand what.
Oh yeah, believe you, believe you me, I know stream.
Yeah, so we want to avoid that here if we can.
Yeah, I get it. So I guess I'll circle back around with the FX design review.
Thank you. Stream is the best example for everything. Things no one understands, things that handle upgrades sort of gracefully. Yeah. the best example of everything. It's also the worst example of everything because it's stream.
Some of the derived classes try to do a one-up on it. Right, Stephen?
Sometimes they get it right.
Yeah, just like files.
We every release we find something that we messed up in some override somewhere.
All right. So, are you happy with that then?
Yep. I'll circle back around in the next day or two.
Sounds good. All right, you're up again. Sorry. Here.
Just this is relatively trivial. The system events is still sealed class. It wasn't changed with 2.0. But it's a static class. It actually has a private constructor in it, sealed.
Seems like a no-brainer to me.
As we're rolling up the win, these things are going to start getting used a lot more now with WinForms coming up online.
Yeah, I mean, we made those same breaking changes in .NET Framework, right? So I think the same thing applies here. I'm fine with that.
Like we talked about it some yesterday, and it is technically breaking, but you have to be doing some really sort of bizarre things to actually have it break you.
Yeah.
Because you can't actually create these things, and
I mean, whatever argument we can put forward would have applied to console, would have applied to environment, and clearly we were able to absorb them in the 2.0 time frame, right? So.
Yep.
All right. Then, since nobody has a dissenting opinion.
Before static class in C#, is that what it is?
Yes.
Well, static class is just abstract CO under the covers.
And the only difference is activator create instance, right?
Yeah, activator create instance, private reflection. If it was protected, you could have inheritance scenarios, but it's private, so that doesn't matter.
Well, the one thing that C# doesn't let you do is you cannot use the static type in signatures. So before you could have written a method that says I accept the system events thing, but
you can have generic.
Even though you
seems
can't
very
create
contrived.
But you would have never been able to call that method.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would have never been able to call the method. You would have, I mean, unless you manually construct one of those with private reflection, which at that point is like, well.
Right.
Yeah, basically when Jeremy was talking with Levi and I yesterday, we determined roughly that anything you could have done with it, you wouldn't have actually been able to do anything because there's no actual instance state or anything. So.
So sealed private, like reflection, including activator.
We have precedent for this. We did it for a few types in 1.0.
Where's Eric?
Well, 2.0, but yeah.
I'm just making sure.
You're here the whole time.
I'm just making sure that we
I just joined.
When we say, like, I think reflection is the only way that you get around this, including activator create, and so that's fine.
This was my fault. I had just chucked it out there early on in 3.0 to unblock some of the porting work. So.
Yeah, I'll probably be circling back around with a number of WinForms ones too. But
are these the only ones, or do you think there's more ones like that?
Well, there's more in WinForms. That would be. I'll also take a look to see if there's anything left in our repo, but that's public.
Yeah, because as far as I'm concerned, you can approve them all because they all have the same characteristics. Anything that has only private constructors and is sealed and only has static APIs is the same.
Well, it would be somewhere in. I'll double check it. All this stuff was originally WinForms code, right?
Yeah,
including system drawing. So it's all going to be in that bucket of stuff. It's where all the Win32 related stuff was exposed, right? And system drawing and these sort of new things that are also came out of the that were forked out of WinForms back in the day. So I'll do a pass, and if you consider them approved, I'll just fix them all in one pass.
Yeah.
If there are any left in our side, it's only a couple. Most of them are over in the WinForms repo, I think.
Okay. All right. Sweet. So does anybody else have something? Otherwise, this is the time where we just walk the list.
Can you add a bunch of APIs randomly that we didn't fill bugs for?
No.
Can we look at the other one that was there for me? That's a few down, and then so I can head into the office.
Which one is that?
It's one a little bit down about context.
Yeah. Here we go.
And there's a really simple one, which we basically already approved, but then we had to back it out, and we're going to expose it to the different API. It's the math min one, a few down.
Hold on. How about we do this? While we have him here.
Everything I want. Only 2?
Yeah, he was slacking off.
Up my numbers.
I need to drop out of the meeting. Is it possible to do that one?
Yep, yeah, I already opened it. It's the second tab.
Okay.
All right, then let's do this.
David, you actually had like 300 before this meeting, but I just went and closed them all.
I knew it!
Good job.
Yeah.
How do I have so little? I'm in shock.
So,
Oh no.
hold on.
Is there even a type there? What's the story here for config and informs? Like,
Well,
I don't know, actually. I'm helping them out
need
now. I'll find
the
out.
BCL settings from it, but you can totally use it yourself. If you want to depend on it, right? But it's not referenced by default. You have to go to your way to get system configuration.
okay. What is this?
Is that a file type? Is it public static file configuration file?
That's a string. It's
String.
it's the path to the actual config file.
Oh, string.
String, yeah. Sorry.
I don't know.
Well, the thing is, it's already exposed, right?
Is it?
Yeah. Basically, you can get it from. There's this data grab back thing.
Yeah.
But if you know the key,
So-
you can already access it. It's just exposing that in a way that we can actually.
Why?
So the actual recommendation is, and that this is sort of weird, but like that's what I had originally proposed, and Jan has suggested that we don't expose that at all, and that we just have those settings sitting in the cache.
I agree.
So there's a collection that those things come from, which it talks about, is that you can actually access that, so that like we don't follow the pattern of continuing to add things to app context anymore. Like we just have settings sitting in there.
Oh, at all? No, I just think so.
Well, generally speaking, the default is not to do that.
I see. Why
So
config
we
file,
would be going to app context, get data, and set data. All right, sorry, no, there's one other piece to it. But like it would be nice to actually like have app context expose the set data. It's not public, but you can get access to it by going through the app domain set data. They're actually the same thing. It's just a little awkward to go find.
So let's
And to understand that those things are actually tied together.
So let's talk about the first one first. So like I disagree with Jan slightly because we have a very similar API that we recently did approve, which was license file property on app domain setup. And it's the same there. It's already exposed in the data dictionary. But the reason we exposed it was, well, because people actually used it, right? So this is the whole scenario of like you bring in existing applications that worked on full framework, or in this case it was some DevExpress component that used the license file property to locate the file and do whatever they do with the license stuff. And this was used by 1.4% of apps, right? So that's not very high usage, and we convinced ourselves that's high enough to do it. This one, the configuration property is used by 15% of apps. So that's, I would say, high enough to say there's no harm in exposing it. The data is already there. It just means that existing code that happens to be compiled for full framework happens to continue to work just fine on core, which to me is adding value.
That's fine.
Yeah.
What
So
would it point to?
there's
It's effectively the name of the host changed to the extension.config. That's all it is. It's basically whatever the property already is in the data bag.
So I think it's fine for compatible. What I'm worried about is people may expect it to work on ASP.NET Core.
Well, okay, so that's what I'm saying. There's the existing thing, which is the app domain setup one, right? So I'm not super
That's
concerned
still
that
there today.
well, app domain setup is exposed.
I
Yes.
see.
The thing is, if you look at actually, it's not. You're right.
Also, app domain setup's not static, and neither is.
What?
You can do app domain, not current domain dot setup information.
Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing.
Sure, but
Yeah,
the class
I
app domain
setup is
which says
okay.
static partial
Sorry.
class app domain setup.
Yeah,
App domain setup
Yeah.
is an instance.
It's not static, and the property is instance.
So basically, like I think for net new ASP.NET Core code, I don't think anybody will go to app domain setup to find the configuration file.
They wouldn't.
If they do, then okay, then they try too hard, right? So this is more, I think, to me, like I don't understand.
Compat thing.
Like yeah, there will be a compat thing.
Yeah,
It's an
it's
existing type, right? So it's fine. For app
So
context, I
just-
don't understand why we need this thing though. Like I still don't understand why we would add it there.
Why do we need?
Why would you add the property to app context?
Yeah. Is it model?
Because tilde doesn't buy anything for
It's not
compat.
strictly necessary. It's just that we do the same. We expose other related things in the same place. That's all.
So you
About
were
the
cutting
runtime
off. Can you
config
speak
file.
up again?
Sorry, I
Sorry.
missed. Why wouldn't we? So there's in desktop there's app domain setup.setupinformation.configuration file. Why wouldn't we just expose this in the same place
Yeah.
today on core?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, that's basically what I'm asking.
That was my proposal up there. Just like Jan.
No, that's different. This proposal up here has it as a static thing on app domain setup.
It
Right, those
It is
statics
on
shouldn't
that.
be there.
No, it's instance.
Oh
yeah,
right,
I that was a mistake type
Yeah,
on my
that's-
part.
Yeah, there would be the
That
existing
wasn't
one,
meant to be
right?
Where
static.
it said public static configuration file, you added the word string, but the problem was it said static where it meant
Yeah.
string. And then the type is
Yeah,
not static either.
the class itself is not static. It was my bad.
Copy paste.
Everybody loves copies.
Yeah, I think it's fine for it to be a compat thing.
Yeah, I think the first one makes sense to me. The second one does not make sense to me.
Yeah.
There's no way to set it right now, and that's a problem for
Set.
some things. Like makes tests not work and stuff like that. There's no way to hack around it.
Because
When
it usually
people are
gets-
still
yeah.
using.
Yeah.
This is mainly about the system configuration stuff, right?
Yeah.
So people getting their app settings.
Is this going to
There's a lot
change
of
the
stuff.
backing config or whatever when you set it?
What's that?
So there's going to be like two sources of truth. There's going to be the way you currently get it, and then there's going to be this new way if you set it.
No, this is the way we currently get it is just getting it with no way for you to see what we're getting at. So
App
now
domain
we would
setup
still
is-
be getting it from the same place effectively. It's just now you can change that with on startup. So with the new startup hooks, you could actually go in there and poke this. The problem is like once something hit this, the whole way system configuration is built is that it's all via reflection and it's all static on the main things that come out. So once it's hit, you're kind of stuck
Yes.
with whatever value it is. And like the workaround now is like requires changing all your code to not use the statics, which is difficult for people to do.
So what's the intent? Is the intent for a test framework that isn't creating app domains on core anymore? Like, how would that work?
So like the scenario now would be that like, so what should happen is like MS Test will actually go and set this thing to be the location of where they're, where the testing app is being run from. Because right now it just, this is the one concrete scenario that's come up multiple times, is that the actual app config that gets loaded is the one for the test harness,
Yeah.
not the actual thing you're testing.
But you can't change that, right? Because it affects both the main app domain and the thing you want to test, right?
Well, it's what you do it for. So when the test harness starts up, it would change it. They do it right now. Like
They do some
the
sort of
historical way,
merging.
the historical way to do it would be to
App domain.
they always create a new app domain
Yeah.
and like give it the place. So like this allows them to do the effective sort of thing. I mean,
But
clearly,
the old way is cleaner because you make a new universe and you point this world to that config file. This way it's changing the current universe in a static way. You can't do something parallel, for example. It just
what's that?
all bad.
No, you could do it in the other one. You could do it even for the initial app domain, right? You can even do that now, sort of. Other than we don't hook it up. We never hooked it up.
How from the host? Like how,
Yeah.
when
If
do you have
host
to
it,
run to make that work? Because
What?
Isn't config read by the runtime itself before your app runs?
No, we don't use it anymore.
No, not in core survival, but in full framework it is.
Well, there's some
yeah.
part in the runtime that reads it, but I don't think that's the same thing as the. Like, they have different caches effectively.
Yeah, we don't read any of it until after the app domain is started. So
kind of
the app domain has the property on it. We get it from that. So like, if you're firing off your own app domain for managed code, you just set it. And
right.
If you need to do it in the initial one, then you would set the app domain setup when you create it, the original one via the host that you created.
Yeah. So
or,
to me, I mean, given that we don't push system configuration moving forward, and given that this API is purely for backcompile, I honestly don't care so much. Like whatever behavior we have currently that works for full framework would work for core as well. It's just we wouldn't push new code down that path.
My only concern is people porting test frameworks or whatever plans to use this won't work the same way.
Well, it'll work effectively.
Well, it would work the same way, except that you can't create new app domains, right?
Which is fundamentally different, right?
It is different. At the same time, though, not everybody does create new app domains, right? People do use the configuration file even if they don't create new app domains.
I would love to see how they plan to use this. It's good, back and pack.
Right.
Shared mutable state is the devil, so.
Well, it's certainly not great.
Yeah, well, ideally, like the configuration system would not be static like that, but
right.
That I can't change.
Okay, and then we just include.
You can see somebody's commented on it 7 days ago. There, like it just keeps.
API on domain.
Yeah. So I had a comment in the chat that I just wanted to weigh in here. So configuration file has a meaning in the current app model that's different from the system configuration meaning, and so the runtime config is the thing that's storing a lot of the application configuration these days in core. So we have runtime configuration settings which plumb through to the runtime as well as to the app context switches. So if we did put anything on app context, it ought to be the runtime config.
Right.
And there are some scenarios for that. Victor hit it the other day when kind of special scenario, but when we have a test case which wants to launch another process and ensure that child process runs against the same shared framework as the parent, he has some really ugly hacks in order to get the path to the running .NET Core applications runtime config file. So, it's just ref counting the fact that we shouldn't put this on app context. And if we did, I don't want to feature creep this issue because this was mainly about system configuration, but it would be nice to see us plumb through the actual runtime config and maybe deps file somewhere.
What is this called? Runtime config?
Runtime config.json.
So like this?
Yeah. Yeah, but I believe that would feature creep this issue because that requires changes to the host, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah.
And coupling to the host.
Well, not bad coupling. It's more like I think that it is set today in a app context like switch in the bag.
In the property bag, maybe.
Because
that's kind of the prop. That was what
depends on the host, right?
You wanted to property bag the app context, the configuration file as well. So, which I still will do, but then it'll publicly expose it through the app domain setup. So it'll come from the property bag if it's there. Otherwise, it's whatever you specify.
All right. So then this one is done.
Yeah.
Brady.
Oh fuck me! I remember this issue.
So we added support for Windows services in ASP.NET Core in our hosting model. We exposed. We had an API called servicehelpers.is in a Windows service, and it was internal. And then some guy said, "I want to use this in my programming," and I said, that's kind of weird." And then he had a use case for it, and we made it everything public. It really shouldn't be in the ASP.NET Core name, because should be part of the service-based universe.
So I don't. So that one I can agree with. Although I think we had a question of like what the heuristic should be. But the question really is, I wouldn't put it on service base, and the reason I say that is because it seems it's a bit weird to pull in an entire thing just to ask the question whether you want in the Windows service, which has no dependency whatsoever, right?
It kind of doesn't this whole this API depends. Okay, maybe not service based, but like today, this coupled to like Windows services, right? In theory.
Well, but so it depends on how you implement the API, right? And presumably, like I think the heuristic that he came up with is you just basically ask what the parent process is, right?
Yeah.
Which is effectively, you at best depend on process in order to get the parent process, and then you just ask for the executable name. Right? You don't need infrastructure of service base. But service base is really more for exposing the entire thing of like the service API layer for the event loop, the restart thing, and like it seems a bit odd that in ASP.NET you would just pull in this whole thing purely to ask this one question.
But presumably, if you're asking this question, you also want to use other APIs on the type because presumably you're special casing it.
So we basically this to see if you're in a service, they mean no op based on that or not.
So, but yeah, my question then becomes like, what do you do when this thing returns true?
We use the console host, the Windows service host. You kind of say if you're in a service, use the Windows service lifetime, like on pause, on start.
But do you use anything in the service base?
Yeah.
On pause, on start.
Yeah, on pause, on start.
So you hook up to all of those if it's true. Well, if that's the case, then it makes sense to put it on the start.
Yeah. Because if you're there are two scenarios, right? One is you're just curious.
Yeah.
And that should probably go in like runtime environment or something like that. Whatever it is in system, runtime, whatever. The other is like if you're asking this question and you're based on the answer you might use these APIs, you're already pulling in the dependency.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, user interactive I think is the wrong way to
that's not right. Yeah, it's not the right thing to say.
Yeah, we really shouldn't be telling people to look at the process. That's it's also not reliable.
Is it not?
No, it's not.
We had some guy figure out the heuristics on this PR.
Yeah, it's
we can review it.
heuristic.
Yeah, we can review it and see if it's any good.
Yeah, because you're gonna have the same problem detecting if it's a Linux service running, if it's a daemon or not.
So the only downside of putting it on a service is if we choose to use the same API for like a daemon or something, then maybe coupling this to Windows is not good. I don't know.
Well, that's why it's named what it is, right?
right?
It would return false if you're running as part of a Linux daemon, right?
So it would work. It's just, do you want the Windows is Linux service on this public API? I don't know.
No, I think they're kind of what's talking about. Like, I mean, you could imagine like if you ever want to add an API that actually has the. So let's say you have a multi-layered system, right? You have like Linux, you have Mac, you have Windows, right? And you want to say, I want to have an agnostic API that basically answers the question, do I run in a service environment?
Yes.
Right? It's still okay to have the OS-specific APIs in the OS-specific place. Like we have a daemon base dot is running in a service, a service base that is running a Windows service, and then if we ever wanted a high-level API, we could still build that. But I don't think. I mean, the problem is with some of the stuff like service base, it's tied to Windows. It's really hard to imagine I would use service base for Linux, for example.
Okay,
and
that's good.
And we have this in other areas where console is kind of already in a place where it's not ideal, but console use is so pervasive that not having console to be the cross-platform terminal would be impossible. But there are a factor no window isn't on it, right? If you were to start over, you probably would design console also differently.
Yeah.
But for high-level things like services, I don't think the problem that this one is there.
No. Okay.
And I think it's okay if it's. I mean, I'm not sure whether we have to put Windows in the name, but you could probably just say it's running as service is probably fine because the whole type is already Windows specific. But I think it's fine to be there then.
Yeah, I kind of prefer as service over in service or under service if we're gonna talk about that.
Yeah, as is fine. It's running as in service. Okay. Like launch in service. I should come to these more often. I get so much stuff done. I'm gonna add 10 to it tomorrow. Just come next Tuesday.
Consider and 2 is running.
The time frame for Trio is like I heard like I have like a week, right, to check in everything before it goes crazy.
Oh, the email?
Yeah, 1 week.
So technically, this one blocking partner. So
yeah,
are you blocked on not having this?
Partner, so it seems more urgent.
It's marked as future.
Well, right now milestone on this is future.
Yeah, Dan explicitly
So-
marked it because he thought it was not required, because you already have a workaround in.
So I'll tell you what, we export the public API. I would love to remove. Put it out.
You have
Is
a
your
public
API new for
API.
3.0?
Yeah, it's new 3.0.
You can still.
Why is it public?
Because some dude wanted to know.
Yeah, but some dude,
Let
like,
him copy
do you
the
have a
code.
valid business justification for adding this
Yeah,
API? Okay.
see, so like we had internal,
Yeah.
and then he found a bug, and then
Yeah.
he had a good scenario where like, oh,
And API or ASP.NET's own design review process said yes, this is the appropriate thing
Yeah.
to make
and
public.
then I
or
said,
API service.
let's put it in core effects, and then it found the bug forever ago.
So it
And
sounds
then-
like your API review process should not have made it public within
What?
ASP.NET.
That's fine. No, sorry, it's a external service.
What we should do is
Yeah.
we should add WebSocket.is.NET 4.5 or greater.
That is the best API.
This application targeting that.
Yeah.
It's my favorite API.
So
Yeah,
I really
my
don't
favorite
like this
API.
in service base. You guys discussed that?
Yeah.
Or-
What's that?
But I mean,
Because
clear-
I really don't like this in service base.
Yeah.
We're-
Because the code that uses it has nothing to do with a service.
Okay.
yeah.
The code is like, the whole point of is it doesn't know if it's in a service, so why would it take a dependency
Well,
on
that's what
that
we just discussed.
out of
we
man
discussed that.
package, which
The idea is that if the API returns true, you have to use service base to hook up certain things.
Right.
But it sounds like
if the API
ASP.NET
returns
already
true, you
made the
have to use
decision
what?
that they're the appropriate place to have this API.
No.
Process.
You made it public in 3.0.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you haven't shipped yet,
We
right?
didn't check yet. Still in the middle, right? Like
I
preview
mean,
7.
APIs are locked down.
No, they're not. What's that APIs?
I mean, there's ASP.NET, right?
We
Not
approve
adding
like a
brand new
couple of
APIs
Yeah.
like
the beauty
this
of being downstream.
that are just based on a whim.
Where would you put it if not in service base? All right, like
Process.
environment process.
I put it on process. I
Okay.
put it on something that's in box so that if there's any library code that has dependency on this and cares, it would not bring in a new NuGet package.
Interesting.
That I'd have to go check the service controller package, but I believe that we only implement that for Windows.
No, I think the API is Windows specific
It is.
because it's the way the whole lifetime model is basically different from how Linux.
See, the weird thing is if you put it on process, you probably don't just want to say, am I running as a Windows service? You probably also want to get the controller instance, which now means that process has a dependency on service controller.
Oh God, no, we
Which
wouldn't do that.
is-
We would just give you the boolean. If you want to then do that, you have to still use the NuGet package. But I think this is why I said earlier, like, what do you like if
it's false, what do you do, right?
yeah if the API returns true and
True.
false and you do the things that are independent of using service base, then not putting it on service
Makes
base
sense, yeah.
adds value because you don't have to pull in a dependency purely to ask a boolean question. But if in one of the cases you end up having to reference a NuGet package anyway to do meaningful work, then you might as well just put the API there.
Why would you reference service base when doing this check?
So here's how it works. So here's the end-to-end, right? You have an ASP.NET application or a background service, and you're running it in VS as a console app. But when you deploy it, it's a Windows service. You call use Windows service, and that code says, am I in a service? If I'm not, use the console and act like a normal application. If I am, use the service APIs to help hook up the events.
I've done this exactly.
I'll give you another scenario. Am I running in a service? Don't show any UI. Okay? If I'm running in a service, show UI. I don't need to use anything in service base to do that. But there's a valid scenario for that. I run an application daily that does that.
Yeah,
It's
but
a
sir,
NVR.
that's not the right question to ask, though. Like, if you want to know if you can display UI, the question you should be asking very specifically is, can I display UI? Like, will UI even show
There's
up? if I
plenty
have
of
it?
other things that, well, so this whole thing is kind of a conflation API. right? And so it's a Boolean state that's trying to.
I mean that's
detect.
fair. I mean we also have environment is user interactive or whatever, but I think is probably for the UI case the better one to ask. Even though it's weird that it returns true from a console app, but
It does.
Because console apps can pop UI.
If you host your own
Yeah.
window.
Because there's a category of applications which can pop UI and a category of applications which can't pop UI, and that category which can't pop UI is more than just services.
So if you're running in like IIS, for example,
Yeah,
in the worker process, you can't like pop UI.
correct. It will. You can, but it'll display on a desktop that no one has access to. So the answer should be no in that case.
It makes for great shell code.
It does. But I mean that's why like I'm not really a fan of APIs where we tell people you can query this to say I am running in this scenario, but people are using it to answer a different question.
Yeah.
So I agree with that, but at the same time, the reality is people will find whatever Stack Overflow answer it is, and if that's the 10-line WMI query, they will do that and do the same thing, right? And so.
But I mean, if we have so there are two scenarios here, right? If we have a scenario where you need to know if you're running in a Windows service, then we should have an API that says I'm in a Windows service. Where that API exists, whatever. If we have a scenario for I need to know if I can pop UI, we should have an API for can I pop UI.
Yeah, which we already have.
There are two APIs
That was just an arbitrary example, but I just wanted to point out that there are numerous ways that and maybe probably a lot more legitimate ways that you can use such a Boolean and then use it to make a decision that isn't interacting with the service control manager.
Yeah. I think so. Eric, to just give you another example why I think it may be better to put on ServiceBase the more I think about it. So today the heuristic I think is get parent process and compare the string of the exe or something, right? But let's say Windows in the future adds an API that I don't know, p-invoke into some weird place, right?
Yeah.
Are we okay with doing that from let's say a process, or do we think there's a layering issue depending on what the module ends up being? Because then we may be better off actually putting it more specific to ServiceBase.
What, like I didn't follow the p-invoke suggestion that this hypothetical.
Well, it's more like imagine the case where today the heuristic is pretty dumb, right? It's like a get parent process string comparison, then you return true or something, right? But let's say there's a better way of doing it, but then depending on what that way ends up being, you may have to pull in more dependencies, right? It could be in p-invoke, it could be another managed API, or I know it could be WinRT API or whatever it is. Like so, the more you
has anyone done that investigation to ensure that there's not a service control manager API?
Yeah,
because I'm pretty certain that information is available in Task Manager.
Yeah, I think there were some people that did that. I don't think anybody had a.
We shouldn't be making decisions based on random community members' hunches and issues.
Look at the PR. Chris did some work. Figure out what works. What is the most reliable way to know? PR, right there. Apple.
That's what I'm saying. Today's world is pretty naive, right? But like, if there's a better API, then we should call it.
I think it was.
Honestly, I would put the p-invoke in. Like, we can do p-invokes better in the framework than we can in NuGet packages, because in a NuGet package, it means we either need to cross-target by runtime. You know, what if we had a shim dependency if we wanted to make this? Yeah, I don't like this heuristic. So I think there must be a better way.
That's what you think. I'll give you a day, Eric.
Always just ping the Windows folks and that's how they're detecting it.
Exactly.
It's true, we're at the same company.
I mean, one straightforward way is to enumerate the services on the machine and compare their process IDs with process kit current process ID.
Yeah, but then that could be flaky if the PID changes or if the process restarts and stops.
The PID can't change for the active process.
Yeah, unless you stop and restart the process.
Yeah, but then the current process that you're
not querying anymore.
Yeah, you're querying.
Somebody just write an email to Mark Krasinovich.
I mean,
yeah, and some services don't have PIDs.
I will bring everyone next one.
No, those ones are fine.
It's fine. It's fine. No, okay. So let's assume there is a better way to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What's the best way to expose the API?
Process.isService
Yeah, so process
No,
or service.
is
based.
It's
running
not
as
is service.
is running as service.
Do you want it to work cross-platform?
What would it mean on Linux?
Exactly.
I'd want it to work for processes that aren't yourself, right? Like, what if it's
That'd be
diagnostic
cool if
information
it could
too?
work on Windows.
I don't know if that
how
makes sense.
You
important
have
it
to
is.
know if it makes sense cross-platform before you put it on process is all.
Well, I think knowing if something is running as some kind of service is likely going to come up for other platforms as well.
What does it mean though?
I mean, daemons are a thing on Linux. And
Yeah,
you
but are
sometimes
they
wanna-
Is that a service?
standardized? Like,
It is
basically the equivalent of a Windows service is a.
but does the kernel know like which
Is it though?
processes are
There's a
services?
special.
not really, right?
There's a special process that most daemons are launched under on
Like
Linux.
System
as
D
well.
or something?
I don't remember what it's called.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I don't think so. Because we have system D support and Windows Server support, and they're different.
Yeah, and not everyone uses System D. There's also like initv. Like there are other.
Init and there's like
Yeah.
Like, so a Windows service is a very well-defined concept
I
in the
would-
operating system.
Yeah, distros unfortunately have their own thoughts sometimes about how to handle like background services.
Anything with the PPID of 1 is for the most part likely a daemon.
I would.
I mean,
not-
that's just the initial process, right?
I would not burn process.isService yet.
Right, but I'm just saying that you could have it return always false on other platforms
You
to
can.
start with. And
Yes.
then when it inevitably comes up that someone asks about, other platform support for it as well, we can then
Figure out how.
break people by starting to return true
Figure
on
out if you
Linux.
can
I
make it
don't
work.
like as soon as we
I
decide
don't
that
know.
like we have an
I would add
implementation
it.
that never returns true on Linux. I think we're going to be required to never return
we
true
just
on
don't
Linux.
document that it never returns true on Linux. We just say that on Windows it reports this, and on other platforms we may report.
So what do we
true.
document though, right? Because if we don't even know today, like on Linux, what is a service,
I think-
then what do we document? Like,
You just document that you may change it for other platforms in the future based on.
I think, given where we are with core, I'm quite comfortable with saying that we will break that behavior in the future by returning true in more cases. If we really feel strongly enough that this is a common break people have, we can always quirk it.
Yeah.
Like, that is a very straightforward quirk.
so
to do.
I'm starting to
burn it?
take Levi's position that you're asking the wrong questions then, because the service is this very ambiguous concept. Like, why are you asking whether you're a service?
Well, let's not go back
Like-
to this one because we already said like there is a legitimate question for asking this particular question. Right? Are you running in a Windows
Oh,
service?
what gets
Now
better-
we're talking about where we put the API. So let's
So-
not go back to whether we should ask the question in the
So
beginning.
let me actually give you a reason why process might not be a good idea.
Okay.
A process can host multiple Windows services.
That's it.
So
Yeah,
it's
I guess
not.
we-
Yeah, but
It's-
that's fine. I mean, you're not going to be able to be more granular than like you're not going to be able to if you have code running inside a process and the process is a service host process,
Yes.
then that code has to be part of a service in that process.
At least
Right.
one service. But if the scenario is I want to know if I'm a service so that I can interact with it,
Yes.
so that I can do operations with it. Now potentially you also need to get the list of services
Which one?
running inside the process.
Yeah, this is an incomplete API.
Huh? What?
The scenario
I
is
mean,
not well
you-
thought.
Why is it incomplete? Because if you host
Because it
more than
doesn't
one,
satisfy the-
Can you?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, so all this information is in Task Manager. This all feels like diagnostic information to me.
But
And you can tie it
understand
together.
The use case, right?
Hmm?
You understand the use case, right?
The use case for this one customer.
No. Not for
I
one
mean,
customer.
Levi said he did it too, right?
It's not for
Yeah,
one customer.
I've done this
It
before.
is literally if you want to test a Windows service without running it as a service, because you need admin and you have to deploy a service.
Yeah.
You want to run it in
Yep.
VS.
I had this
This
exact
has
same
to
scenario.
this has to work.
Yeah.
So the question
So
is,
you can test it. Like if you want to test it that way, you can pass in flags in your tests. Like
It's-
you can mock it, right?
but you
And you
understand
can
that like
communicate that state and plumb it yourself rather than
So-
And that's actually
trying
how
to
it's all done.
interact
Let's-
with the system. in
let's
order to
step
do
back
so.
for a second and think about customers. and projects and templates and file new experiences. You do file new blah application. You come out saying, I want a Windows service. It adds code to your app saying use Windows service. All good. And you hit F5, you want it to light up you want it to work as well as it would work in a Windows service without running as a service, right? By default. So you can test it, debug it, play with it, and then when you deploy it, it does all the Windows service things on the cover without you have to worry about it. Without you having to mess with your arguments in the command line, because we can't really like force you to pass in the right thing.
The thing is, because launching a service involves some amount of overhead that the application can't really work around,
yeah,
they're going to have to do that anyway.
They don't. So we do it for different things. So for example, IX and process, we have code that says, are you running an IX? If you're not, don't
So you're the entry point.
Huh? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The like Visual
exactly,
Studio
yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
Because when I did this, like my exe was itself the entry point, but you're saying that's not really the scenario you're going for.
It's library code. The customer owns the entry point, so we can't mess with their main.
Right, but
So
generally speaking, the main is the thing that needs to determine if it's in a Windows service and then do stuff.
Exactly. So in our library code, you call use Windows service. That code checks to see if it needs to wire the Windows service lifetime environment based on where they're running.
Okay.
Right. So it's just like am I running in dev? I'm running in prod? That kind of check, right?
Got it.
But it's just trying to be a little more smart about default, so you can run it in VS without having to deploy a Windows service to even test it, right? And I think if you're gonna burn a name, don't burn it on process. Burn it on service base, because if you're consuming this API to get the events for lifetime, have a bool saying, am I in a Windows service? And then it's a pretty like low bar, right? And if you figure out later on that there's a generic service concept that makes sense to put in process, then put it on process and have it be more generic. But
so why not have all the service control and enumeration APIs exposed?
If a scenario comes up where it's needed, that sounds fine, but it's not needed in this case.
I think it would be to implement this correctly.
How? Why?
I believe that you have to call into the service control manager in order to correctly answer this question. I
don't understand.
I just researched. You can do it by enumerating services.
Why do you have to enumerate the services running in the process to answer the question?
Levi said checking the parent.
No. You enumerate all services on the machine. You find their PIDs.
I don't care
if
you have a better version. That is completely fine. I'm asking about the API being exposed. Why is it incomplete for exposing a bool on this type?
Is the end-to-end scenario complete?
I gave you the
You want the service, right?
Huh?
You want the service name too, right? What service name are you running in if you want to control that service?
You just want to write to
No.
the like service output, right?
Service control manager, put that using the service name that you're running as.
So in my mind, an API is incomplete if you have to add more APIs to do like
Anything
basic
useful.
things, right? So like this API is useful by itself in that scenario. If you have more scenarios, you can add more APIs. That doesn't mean this API is incomplete. It just means you need more APIs for more scenarios. If you have an Uber API that can solve all scenarios, then I'm okay to hear it. But for this scenario where I want to know if I'm running a service, it seems as though you wouldn't need much more than a better version of what we did for the current API that we use. And I'm fine making it like be good. I just don't want to like not have the API because we have different scenarios that require different APIs. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I honestly think that there are better ways to solve this scenario that you're proposing, for at least for test.
Can you think of ways to solve it that don't interfere with the person's program main or require passing manual arguments in to check to see where they're running?
So presumably there's this Boolean, like let's invert it and say rather than check if you're running inside a service, check if you're running inside a test.
This is not a test though.
And I'm sure that there's
it's not a test, right?
the test line.
It's not a test though, right? It's an app.
It's like Control F5
Like,
versus.
you built an application and you double click the application.
It's self-host.
Yeah,
scenario.
it's self-host versus like being run under service host. Because you call service.add blah, pass an exe name, and then you call service host.run.
see. Yeah, I mean, I could think of numerous ways to plummet through if you touch the code, because the service control manager has a unique, or sorry, the service startup has a unique entry point, and so you just use the absence of like you have that when you go through that entry point, you can set a flag, and when you don't go through that entry point, you don't set the flag.
Yeah,
I guess I don't understand why that wouldn't.
But you need 2 entry points then for your app to identify that.
You don't need 2 entry points. It's all the same main. It's just that when the service, when you're started by SCM, it passes some flags.
I see.
It's too late though. See, the issue is we don't even want to wire. So here's the question: can I wire up all that code, no matter where I run, and have it not blow up? If that works, then maybe we don't even we don't have to check at all. If I can run all this service-based code and it won't like blow up in horrible ways, if I'm not in a service, that's one way to make it work, right?
Run all the. I don't understand what you mean.
If you call use Windows service, what we do is we hook up on starting and on stop and on pause, and we change the interactions based on those callbacks. So for example, if on start never fires, your app won't start. So if we hook up all the callbacks and they don't fire, it doesn't work. So we change the lifetime management to be based on the console, which waits for Control C versus waiting on start from ServiceBase. As a concrete example of things we change based on if you're in a service or not.
I see.
And this is like ASP.NET as a framework, so like we don't or
it's actually not ASP.NET for all. It's all in our hosting layer. So extensions hosting just does this stuff.
Sure,
right?
but like in our
so you already
new project templates, this is done if you choose like a service.
You already depend on ServiceBase.
Yeah, exactly. So the use Windows service call will wire up a different lifetime if you're running the service. It changes the lifetime and it changes the logging to go to the event log. We have those 2 behaviors based on if you're actually running in a service or not.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like someone should probably look at the Uber scenario of testing a Windows service and come up with the right end-to-end.
The same solution?
Hmm?
Huh? I don't understand like what.
I don't
if
feel.
You think the API is bad?
Are you suggesting like our templates like take the arguments and like flow it through to like our
Just
call
handle.
to like configure Windows service or whatever?
I'm looking at the code right now.
Yeah, maybe if we fire on start no matter what, then
question.
that's fixed. That's a fix. You make the service base not be a service if you're not running in the service. I'm not sure what that would mean.
I'm pretty sure that ServiceBase, like, did you look into how ServiceBase is tested in CoreFX?
No.
To see?
Of course not.
Hmm?
Why? No. No, of course not.
Okay, because I imagine they hit the same problem. I don't think we test everything through.
Does it even have text? That's the question. Does it have text?
Hmm?
Maybe there's no text.
No, there is tests, and we definitely do the tests where we install it too.
Yeah.
It's significantly different code path on install too, because you're running in a different context. You have a different token. So it's like we test. I'm pretty sure we test both scenarios. I'm gonna poke around. Ultimately, I'm really nervous about jamming this API in this late.
That's fair.
And
that's fair.
And I like if this was early in the release process, I don't think I would be pushing back. But the fact that we have we're gonna fire this in and then support it for forever after that it makes me pretty nervous to be just accepting it at this point.
Right.
Like I would accept it for future right now, and then we wait and see.
That's fair.
But that, I mean, I'm not ultimately I don't I'm not the person here.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is just an opinion.
I don't have a pushback for making it. The future.
Check the
super late.
Check the Teams chat also. I put pointers in to how you can make this check more reliable.
Good.
It ends up querying the entire list.
Yeah, that's basically what it does. It queries every single service on the machine.
That's it.
And then checks the
is it
PID
me?
against the local PID.
That's fine. It's run
Yeah.
once.
Yeah.
A startup. So it's
Yeah.
Yep.
That's your
And
function.
I think we might even expose the. I was looking. We have some APIs that we at least have the p invoke that you would need for this.
Right, we don't
And I was-
expose the PID publicly though right now.
Oh, we
would
don't.
just have to change
I
that.
see. So yeah, I mean that seems like a good diagnostic feature.
Yeah.
And if we did that, then. So we have Git services.
Yeah, and I still think there's probably a cross-platform story here because both Linux and Mac have the concept of background services, which they both call daemons, which are going to be in the similar scenario of you have to do admin setup, sudo setup to get everything working, and you may want to have slightly different behavior in your dev environment. And they both have functions for querying whether or not you're a service and mechanisms to detect it. So
But this one I think is an orthogonal issue. Like I think we can scope this to be Windows specific, and then we can decide whether it should live, what behavior it should have.
Yep.
And then once we have a cross-platform scenario for asking this question, we also know what the behavior needs to be.
Yep.
Because I think otherwise it's very hard to design a cross-platform UI if the only implementation you have is Windows.
right, my point was that like maybe we should take it into consideration that there is likely another story here, and if we're going to say it's future anyways, then we can look into that before the API is exposed. And if not, we should keep it in mind and decide when we approve the API whether we're going to have a dedicated Windows one or whether we're going to make it general purpose and allow expanding it later.
We do both.
Yeah, like in the case of
Yeah.
ServiceBase, like if you want to support it, like if you want to add systemd support to ServiceBase, that'd be sweet. But you know, like that seems like a big feature.
Sorry, just so you know, we have the same thing for systemd, which is a Linux thing, right? So we have the exact same feature, exact same behavior. You call use systemd, and it does a check if you are in systemd, and if it isn't, then you get console behavior. We have this running like on every platform with the same kind of semantics. So it's not like I don't know if the whole thing about completeness. I get what you're saying, but we're not just hacking one thing for Windows. This literally works across iOS, Linux, and Windows, different models, right? And they all have to check to see where they're running to know if to do more stuff. Right? If you run in iOS and you have the same binary that can be run in iOS or on the command line, you have to check to see where you are, and then if you're not there, then you run on the console. It's the same concept.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, we could expose the API that lets you implement that check,
The
right?
rule or the
Expose the API that lets you compute it. So I'm poking around at, like we actually expose a service controller type, and we expose an API that lets you get all the service controllers.
Yeah. But why not implement both then? If the thing you're gonna ask is, am I running in the Windows service? If that is like a common thing to ask, why not make it easy instead of just exposing just the guts of how to do it? I mean, it doesn't hurt to do both, right? It just means you can do more by looking at all the services, I guess, in the process.
Yeah.
The current
Yeah,
universe.
potentially.
Yeah.
I want to look at it more.
Yeah,
Wait, we're done.
it's fair to say it's very late, even though I thought the bug forever ago. That's fair. I'm not pushing back at that. I just think.
Okay.
I just think you'll end up with a bool that says the same thing with a different name, like somewhere
If this
else.
process is a service process.
Why not put the API for now in the ASP.NET internal namespace? That way it can be
It
deprecated.
should be internal. You make it internal.
No. I mean, if
Yeah,
don't you have a concept of public APIs in an internal namespace?
We
We
had.
used to. We're trying to get rid of it.
They're all
actually.
gone though.
Why are you trying to get rid of them?
Pub internal.
No.
Why?
Yeah.
I'll tell you why. No, I'll tell you why. I know why. A patch happened, and we had to change API, and the PM org decided that we can't change internal APIs. And I went, what? That is like a bad thing, then they said, yeah, well.
In a patch.
Who was the PMO?
Huh? Damien. We were supposed
What was his reasoning for that? Because
they're
there's a known break.
public.
Well,
And the
but
patches were so like.
I think for
damaging.
patches, I guess for patches I would be okay with that, but I would say that across minor versions that should really be okay, right? Like otherwise, you might as well just make the API public and call it public, right?
So we're doing.
That's what.
What's the
We're making
difference?
everything in the public or internal now because that gray area of like. So
It was confusing to people too. Like it was very confusing.
Well, except for it's alternate guys.
Yeah.
But you put a comment on the API saying this is not for use publicly. This is only used for internal. Blah 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 blah. Like yes, does.
Yeah.
I think you can make it work if you had an analyzer in the comments.
Like if all the tooling understood it, like it'd be different.
You mean the
Even
analyzer
that I don't
apps
buy
is
that
already
because
configured?
quite frankly,
Yes.
people like if I see a namespace called internal. And you don't feel dirty by calling it, like I mean,
Exactly.
the amount of analyzers that can give you
So-
to make you feel more dirty is
one
not going
issue,
to
though,
change
and
that.
This actually relates to an API review discussion we had like 2 or 3 weeks back, where, and a conversation you were having on Twitter the other day too, where if you have a bunch of namespaces at the top of your file,
Right.
and your file is relatively large, you don't necessarily know where the types that you're using came from. So you don't know if just typing a line of code it's actually dangerous or not, in the sense that you're using a pub-terminal type.
No, I get that. All I'm saying is that at some point somebody must have added the using for the first internal usage, right?
Yes.
If you don't feel dirty at that point in time, like whatever code you write after doesn't
Yeah.
matter anyway.
But the
right?
thing
Like,
is, now you and I are working on the same code base. You did something dirty. I don't know. I just happened to open the file in my editor,
Yep,
make
Microsoft
changes, and
is
now I did
Analyzer.
something.
Analyzer.
Yeah.
It was super
Obsolete.
The original analyzer.
2 minutes. That's
All right,
That's cheating.
let's. So I wrote this one here. I changed my wording. I
Leave it in
unimproved the
future.
API. I left it in future. I said API needs work, so somebody has to do homework.
That is like the worst.
I know,
result
right?
Of this
It's-
meeting.
I think we should do it.
Like I wish I hadn't brought this up.
No, it's good. It's fine. It's not a big deal.
So okay, we talked
So
about
it
this
looks
one.
like it's trivial to add the PID to service controller.
Right.
We already have all the information.
Yeah,
And
we do.
It's literally just passing that to the constructor. It's no new p invokes. So
Sweet.
that could be something that's very simple and unblocks this scenario.
Nice.
All right. So, what the fuck is this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can we punt on this one for now and
Yeah,
see how
it's not,
things
it's,
go?
it's not important for now.
I kind of want
I
us to
sense
be
some
present when we
controversy
talk about this.
Yeah, it's fine. You can punt it.
Okay, then let's not.
We should definitely do it though, because I found the bug.
Yeah, but can we do this one essence here though?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've got the, if you scroll down a little or just click on the page for math min.
12.
Um,
Fix math on main.
Yeah,
didn't know it was
we
broken.
kind of have.
What did you do? But you already brought float. The other ASP.NET Core like numbers to be like tons of zeros. Thanks, Tanner.
just,
No shade.
Second
No
page.
shade. No shade.
I saw it on the first page. There we go. So we had previously reviewed this, or I had previously made a breaking change here to make it IEEE compliant. We had to revert that because it ended up breaking WPF. IEEE 754/2019 is basically all but approved now, and they've changed the spec to say that they're exposing both a regular max function that propagates not a number and a version that does not propagate not a number. So I'm suggesting we just expose the one that does propagate, that does not propagate as the as additional functions with these names to match the IEEE names.
Okay, so these functions do propagate now.
No, these ones do not. The originals do.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, got it.
Yeah.
So math.min propagates NaN.
Yeah, math.min propagates not a number today, and these ones would not.
So what does that mean? So what is so let's say X is NaN and Y is not. What does max give?
It
me?
returns Y instead of not a number. Basically, it's returning the valid number that is not a number. Hence the name max number.
And if you pass NaN for both of them,
then you get one of the two NaNs.
Okay.
Gee, that's subtle.
Dependent on the input. But it's important for
Can you have unique NaNs? Like, are they distinguishable?
For double, there's approximately 9 quadrillion NaNs.
Okay.
And they can have payload information that represents errors or other additional information. So.
I figured, but I had to ask.
That is awesome.
Which is why propagating is sometimes important.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was wondering.
Yeah.
So you said that's the name that they approved.
Yeah. So the name that they formally use in the spec is maxnum and maxnum mag. And so I just exploded the name to number and magnitude.
See, if I'm a standard developer and I call math dot and I see max and max number, I would get very.
That's
Yeah,
annoying.
I think that distinction is too subtle.
I feel like it should be like math.f.max or something. I don't know if that makes it better. Like, hide it for people who need to like implement IEEE compliant math.min for their language.
I mean, both are IEEE compliant is the problem.
Oh, okay, sure. But like this form of IEEE compliant.
I think this is the case where IntelliSense is going to be your best help, much like most of the functions on
relying on the
Mac.
star.
So let me ask you this: what should most people call?
It depends. So
most people don't care, right?
So for 2000 for the 2008 and 1985 spec, this version, which I'm proposing we expose, is the only version that was in the spec. The version that we had, which does propagate, was only added in 2019 because a number of implementations expose both, or have non-deterministic behavior where they pick one or the other. And so IEEE basically just said, let's expose both and have names for them, and that solves the problem.
So how do they call our math.min?
What do you mean? Like
do they call one min and the other one min number?
Yeah, there's one called Mac. Here, let me remote into my machine and pull the spec again.
I guess all I'm getting at is like similar to Levi's reaction is like, minimum, maximum are fairly fundamental, simple concepts for most people, right?
Yeah.
That's not something where somebody would pull up an IEEE spec and says, oh, I wonder how math.min works, right? People have somewhat of an intuitive understanding of what that means, and...
You think you do until you...
No, I'm not disagreeing with you that it's complicated. Yeah. All I'm saying is that people have an expectation. Now you present them with two APIs that I think don't really help you answer the question which one you should call. So people will call probably min because it's shorter. So it's like, oh, min number, min...
I'm hoping muscle memory would just do that too. Because most people, when they call math min, math max, are passing in some type of integer.
Right.
Most people. And I guess my tripping point would be if I'm new to .NET and I see both max and max number, even if I'm just using integers, I might just call max number and have this automatically widen to double. But now the return type would be weird, so maybe no one will do that in practice. Yeah. Except for now people use var everywhere, so it'll actually be a double.
Well, I mean, math.max itself has int overloads.
Yeah. But max number would also match because int can be converted to double implicitly.
Yeah.
Here we go. Here's the spec.
So if I never use NaN, these implementations are equivalent, or not?
Yeah, if you never use NaN, they're equivalent. Okay. If you use NaN, then it makes a difference on whether you get a NaN or whether you get the actual number.
Yeah, the problem with NaN is you never use it, but you may get it back from.
Right.
Does it make sense to have like an IEEE math or similar class?
This is still the same root problem as when we are going to have to discuss where to expose the half and quad functions.
Yeah.
In that continuing to explode math may be a bad idea, and maybe we should just do what other languages do and expose them as static methods on the primitive types themselves, but there's been pushback on that in the past. And
well, that would still, we would still have the whole NaN versus not NaN thing.
And you wouldn't have the opportunity of just putting these things in a new class. Not saying you necessarily should. But.
Right.
Another
But
thing
then
you
it's
could
at
do.
least relegated to this is on float and double only.
So what if we actually just had an overload of max that took an enum, which is nan behavior?
That's going to slow down perf for cases where min and max are considered perf critical.
Yeah, but if this method is properly inlined, the enum value should just be a compile time constant.
Maybe.
Assuming perf weren't an issue, did the API design that I just mentioned make logical sense?
I mean, we do this for rounding, no?
No, for rounding, we have the midpoint rounding thing. And that's another discussion that has to happen in the future, which is some people want to be able to control the rounding mode. How do we support that for functions other than just round?
But coming back to what I just asked, though, like assuming we could make the perf work, would math.max overload double nan processing behavior enum? Would that make more sense than having a max number method?
It might, but I think that would also potentially be confusing.
It would only be on the double overload.
I think it's less confusing than a different name.
Because I think it's more confusing from the perspective of, like, you should call the overload that doesn't take it for everything that isn't the non-propagating version.
Yes.
And so then the extra argument's basically pointless.
Well, the overload is the other named thing. I mean, we could add new enums later, or new enum values later, potentially. Besides, we need to fix something else with the spec.
Yeah.
Well, because I'm also thinking, like, I know perf is critical. We can always make the perf work. Like, we can contort the runtime however we need to make these methods have the best performance.
Maybe that's postponed because we're like 1 minute over time, and I feel like we're not being done in 5 minutes on this one. Like, it seems like, I think my general gut reaction is a new top-level name seems bad. Unless the name is distinctive enough so people understand what the fuck it means. Because max and max number is, if you ask somebody on the street, they're basically equivalent choices.
Well, that's also true for basically anything. If you ask a random person on the street about IEEE math, most people still think that A plus B plus C is the same.
But in this case, the random person on the street is the person who's going to be using math.min or math.min.
But that's my point. You're introducing an API that allows people to differentiate, but because the names are not distinctive, effectively you will have a 50-50 spread between these two APIs. I'm not sure the world is better off at that.
We should just be making the decision for them, basically, and if you really know what you're doing, you should hide.
Either that, or we just need to be more explicit of what it is, right? So, for example, let's take Levi's proposal with the enum. You could imagine we apply editor browsable never on the existing ones that only take 2 arguments. We introduce a new API that takes the nan behavior one with a default value. So in IntelliSense, you see, there's a default value here. The default value is this behavior. If I want to specify something else, I can.
But I feel like pushing anything off the normal happy path being math.min, math.max 2 arguments would be kind of crazy because that's what everyone calls, right?
But most people call it with integers.
Yeah. Okay, fair.
Yeah. And I mean, even then, you still have the 2 argument version, right? It's just that you also in IntelliSense always see the third option, and you can customize
as like the first one, or just like as an option.
No, I'm saying so today we have math.min that takes AB, right?
Yeah.
I'm saying let's apply editor browsable never on this one. Let's add a new overload that takes AB.
But what if
takes AB and a behavior, and the behavior is defaulted.
So my argument is most people don't care about the behavior. So why are we asking them to pass the third argument if like the 2 argument overload would do the default?
It's defaulted, so that's why you don't.
But why would the 2 argument one be editor browsable never? Like, don't we still?
Because you want IntelliSense to always show the third.
You want IntelliSense to show the 3 argument one, but when they close the parentheses, it'll actually end up calling the 2 argument one.
Yeah,
I mean, just so people know.
Yes, it's basically like
realistically for most purposes, unless you're using not a number as a sentinel value like WPF was, you should be calling this overload.
Okay.
Is this something we would change in vNext? Or is that considered just too breaking?
I think it's probably too breaking to change the behavior of the original one.
Would be my guess.
Yeah, and so IEEE calls them minimum number, maximum number, minimum number magnitude and maximum number magnitude and minimum magnitude maximum.
So it's number versus magnitude, is that?
No. Magnitude
Just
is the second
constant.
overload there. Magnitude takes the larger of the two absolute values, or the smaller of the two absolute values,
I mean,
which
it
are
makes sense.
magnitudes.
I guess.
In the same reasoning, number makes sense because it's saying I'm picking the number versus the thing that's not a number.
Yeah. Again, I think we should postpone this one.
Yeah.
A little bit more stuff in there, and then actually get,
It makes sense
The-
once you know.
because I don't want to have like just a creeping thing of.
A lot of these concepts are already exposed in SIMD. It's just
Right.
Yeah, I think this is really
Right.
just a question of like,
Yeah, Cindy is.
we're never going to come up
specialized.
with a better name for this
Yeah.
because like
course not.
if someone suggested even like IEEE min, that's not going to be valid because both are IEEE.
yeah.
And
I'm just upset we had to revert your original change. Like, obviously, I hate that we have to move
Yeah.
off the math.min and max that exist, right? But anyway.
and so I don't think we're really going to come up with better names other than maybe something like max non-propagating and max magnitude non-propagating, or something that requires like super verbosity on a line for something that really should be the thing that you call by default for most doubles and floats.
Yeah, that's what I didn't understand, is like going forward for doubles and floats, that is like the
Right.
existing version is the one you don't want to call. Which is annoying.
Yeah, but then it also depends on what you're doing. Like, if you're doing game programming or things like that, you want to call this one. If you're doing WPF, you want to call the existing one because they propagate nons for sentinel values.
Right. All right. So then let's just end this one for now, and then more stuff later.